Welcome to the 2019 football season. Gary and I are in our fourth year of running NUIC Football Fanatics. We concluded the 2018 campaign with our third straight state championship, the first in conference history. The title chase for 20 was completed by the Forreston Cardinals as they brought home their third state title over the last 5 seasons. And as we enter the 2019 season, we have a new look to the NUIC. We go back to a north-south alignment in the conference.
It's really nice. Now we're getting away from that small school, big school where, so often that led to, for you guys, a couple heated debates. But anyway, it's nice to see, just the north of 20 and the south of 20. We get big schools and small schools, so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Definitely. It's one of those things that should have taken place a while back ago. You can go all the way back to 2009 or 2010 when a lot of the bigger schools were already down into Class 1A at that time. But it's something that has finally taken hold, and a lot of that had to do with the fallout of teams going to 8-man football. Polo and River Ridge both leaving to start this season at 8-man, and then Warren leaving the NUIC to go into their co-op with Blackhawk up in Wisconsin. So the North-South, will bring about a different look. But if you take a look at the teams that are going to be lining the top of the two divisions, your conference powers really aren't going to change a whole lot. We have 2 teams coming into the 2019 season that are going to be a shoo-in for at least top 5 rankings, if not top 3 rankings to start off the year in the state. One team, which we'll talk about later in this show, is going to be the heavy favorite to bring home a state title in Class 1A. And then you still have some other teams that put together great showings last year in 2018 and look to improve upon that coming into the 2019 season, which really, after last year you can kind of say, hey, don't count everybody out. Milledgeville was that surprise team that really took effect. They didn't make a deep playoff run, but they gave the state champs everything that they could handle and more, and lost by 2 points in overtime. So you never want to count anybody out. And that was the exception of that rule.
Absolutely.
So we'll get ready to kick off the 2019 campaign with our North Division preview coming up right now. So as we open up in the North Division, as you can see, we have the teams that used to be part of, or at one time were a part of, the old NWIC conference, which for a lot of people that have been around the conference for quite a few years, and we're talking 20 or 30 years or better, the NWIC holds dear to the heart of those that played in it, were around when it was around. But those teams, Lena Winslow, Dakota, Stockton, Orangeville, East Dubuque, Du-Pec is the one exception to the old NWIC. They were never a part of it. But then you have Galena. So you're really putting a lot of these teams that were in the NWIC or the old Upstate Illini Conference West Division back together, reuniting a lot of these rivalries that people were really enjoying until it got split up when we went to Northwest and Upstate divisions.
Let's not get too much into old rivalries, all right?
So while we close out the whole NUIC Northwest and Upstate deal, just a couple things that to look back on. The Northwest Division had produced 9 state champions in the past 12 seasons. They brought home the last 3 state titles. And if you take a look as we move into the North Division layout, obviously Forreston and EPC are going to move to the South Division, where Conference Powers Dakota and Lena Winslow stay in the North Division. And you take a look at all these teams that are now here. Since 2001, they still have 8 state champions and 2 state runner-ups in this conference alone. Dakota leads the way with 9 conference titles, 3 state championships. Lena Winslow is next with 7. Stockton's next with 8 conference titles. And then Lena Winslow with 7 conference titles and 3 state championships. Galena has 3 conference titles and 2 state championships in that time. And then East Dubuque had their 2 conference titles when they were back in the upstate division. And even Orangeville got in there for a conference title back in 2001, right at the very start of the NUIC. Obviously, you take a look, since 2010, this side of the conference is going to have 4 state champions in it. 3 of them come from Lena Winslow themselves. The 4th one is from Dakota from back in 2011. And then you have the state runner-up in Stockton in 2012.
It's quite a good showing. I mean, strong teams, and it's year after year domination, almost.
Right.
You know.
Obviously, you know, the team that's really been on fire here as of late have been the Forest and Cardinals. There again, like we stated, moving to the South Division, and then even in 2014 you had EPC, now in the South Division, also as the state champs. So it really gives us a more balanced approach to what we have here.
Yeah, it's definitely not north or northwest heavy. It's nice to see that, you know, the division.
Right. Yeah, and I think what this new format's going to lead to is better competition. I think you're going to see a little bit more of the cream rise into the cream of the crop rise into the top, so to speak, because you're going to start seeing some of these teams that could have been making the playoffs in years past that were stuck in, you know, the Northwest or upstate divisions even, where they just were getting beat and weren't getting that opportunity to get to the playoffs. That's going to start coming to the forefront now. So that's going to be interesting to see. And one of those teams I really look at mentioning that is actually in West Carroll, where, you know, they have had a tough time getting good teams into the playoffs coming out of the Northwest Division, which has proven to always be tough, like we stated, you know, 9 titles in 12 seasons. But here we are, 2019, North-South divisions. So we'll break down each team in the North Division right now. The Galena Pirates finished the 2018 season 2-7, and they were 1-7 in the NUIC Northwest. Obviously, things with Galena haven't been right since the 2015 season. They've missed the playoffs for 3 consecutive years. Their losing seasons for 3 consecutive years is the first time they've had that happen since 1956 to 1958. So it gives you a picture of how dominant Galena has been over the years, that they've reached just the first 3 consecutive years of losing seasons in 60 years.
Well, that's huge for their program. I mean, not the losses, but being that much of a powerhouse, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I know you tell stories about how afraid you were of Galena back in the day. Well, that's a story for, you know, another time.
So, you know, the last time Galena had missed the playoffs 4 straight years in a row was 1981 to 1984. But keep in mind, that was in the 5-class system, and all 4 of those seasons for Galena were actually seasons that they had winning records. They just didn't make the playoffs. So, you know, as we go into 2019, the biggest question for Galena is, can they turn this ship around? They have a good core of seniors that can lead the way, but there's been a lot of talk on the fresh soft team over the last year, which are now their sophomores and juniors. And if you take a look at their sophomore class, they're getting a lot of size, which Galena has always been known to have big lines.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
So, obviously, they need to get in the mix with some talented seniors to get back to the top of the conference. And to kick that off, you know, their big one is going to be Henry Anderson at quarterback. He threw for 648 yards last year, had 6 touchdowns plus a rushing touchdown. in order for Galena to be successful, he's going to have more production than that. Some other guys that you can look at to pick up the slack is going to be Peyton Bauer. He returns again at running back and linebacker. He was second team all-conference as a linebacker last year. Pitched in with 431 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns as well. And another guy you got back is Damian Stephanopoulos at running back / receiver and defensive back. He had 355 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. You start looking at some of the other things, and you have Hunter Baston back, which we've heard about him more so on the defensive side of the ball, but he plays running back on offense. Isaac Stengel's back at tight end and linebacker. This will be his 3rd year as a varsity player for the Pirates. And then you add in a couple other guys on the line.
Oh.
Yeah, on the line you got Andrew Tepley and Mitchell Foley, David Garcia and Austin Meyer, and then even Clay Folks could be that other person that could actually create the 5-man line that they have, or they have some availability to go O-line, D-line, and kind of do something that can intermix some things. Mix that in with a couple of the sophomores that we have not mentioned on here. As long as they can develop that talent, this could be a turnaround year for Galena, considering the difference in the conference realignment as well. The Du-Pec Rivermen. Du-Pec finished 3-6 last year in their 2nd season as the Rivermen in their co-op, and they were 2-6 in the NUIC Northwest. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk around the Durand and Pectonic communities that keeps coming up over the rise of the Rivermen. And while we keep seeing year-to-year improvements, a lot of people are now starting to talk about the Rivermen being in conference title contention, or at least want us to put them in that talk. Well, is 2019 the year that the Rivermen can break out? It could be. However, there's still a large gap between them and the top of the NUIC North Conference.
I think it's safe to say their goal should be, let's just try to make playoffs.
Right, exactly. And that's where their focus should be. And they have that ability to be able to make the playoffs, especially considering the conference realignment, if they can pick up their play and finish ball games. They're going to have some seniors that can lead this team, but they still have quite a bit of younger players that need to step up and, put their end of the bargain in order for Du-Pec to be successful. So obviously one of those guys that is going to be a huge factor for Du-Pec is going to be Eli Smith.
Mm-hmm.
He plays at wide receiver, tight end, linebacker. Hasn't had a whole lot of offensive production in his career. Only has 53 receiving yards. Has made impact on the defensive side of the ball, however. He's going to have to be one of those guys that leads this team if they want to get to the playoffs. Another one is going to be Cody Richardson. Cody Richardson was an honorable mention all-conference selection for offensive line last year. Also played at linebacker. Another kid has a lot of fire in his belly. Needs to have that in a positive manner and demeanor to lift up his teammates to get them motivated and moving forward. At quarterback, we got the coach's kid, Hunter Hoffman. Last year he had 2 rushing touchdowns and only 56 passing yards, so he's only going to be a sophomore, and it's one of those where that the talent level is there, but can he sustain the rigor of a varsity schedule?
I'm sure he can. I have faith.
You have faith? Some other guys to watch out for. Obviously, you have Mason Manning, who's been this will be his 3rd year as a starter for the Rivermen. Another guy that I'm really excited to see what can happen. He didn't have a whole lot of production last year, but I've seen some of the work he's done in the off season. And I think he can be a catalyst for the Rivermen this year in his senior year, and that's Justin Wishart, running back and linebacker. I think he can do a lot of things that can help turn this around for them. Also, Blake Berry on the offensive and defensive lines. Trayvon Stifter at running back. We saw him quite a bit last year as a sophomore. This year as a junior. He's going to have to be that lead guy at the running back position that can get the hard yards, get the fast yards, and they're going to have to use him quite a bit, I feel. Some other guys to help out at the receiver positions, as you expect Du-Pec to kind of start to materialize what they will become, whether it be a power wing, a spread type team. They have right now that ability to kind of cross it up, but you have Trenton Taylor, Grant McCullops, and Gabe Howard, and possibly even Landon McKnight as another receiver option. And then on the line you have Kyle Kniff and Nick Upman returning, Tyler Singley returning. So they have the ability to make a good offensive defensive line. It's just how can they put all this together? Once they start putting this together, then perhaps we can start talking about them raising up the ranks of being that conference title contender. But like you said, right now, the playoffs is what Du-Pec needs to reach for. The East Dubuque Warriors come into the 2019 season after finishing 2018 with a 3-6 record, going 2-6 in the NUIC Northwest. The Warriors haven't made the playoffs since 2013. Their last winning record came in 2014 when they finished 5-4 in the Upstate Division before they moved over to the Northwest Division. Obviously, with the new conference realignment, they're going to face some familiar faces in the Dakota, the Lena, Winslows, the Orangevilles, the Galenas, and the Du-Pecs, but they will square off with a few other teams that they have not seen since the 2014 season.
Unfortunately, East Dubuque did lose a lot last year because they were a heavily dominated senior team. So I'm interested to see on what you have to say on who's going to fill those gaps.
You're right. I mean, they do lose a lot of talent off of that team, being like you said, they were senior heavy. They have some kids that can come back. They only bring back about 1,200 yards of total offense. One of those is going to be Trey Culbertson. Trey was an honorable mention all-conference end and defensive back for East Dubuque last year. Has 425 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns in his career. Can play in multiple positions, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. You can see him at running back. You can see him at wide receiver. It's going to be really interesting to see who East Dubuque really puts at quarterback. And then it's going to be interesting to see how or what offensive schematics they actually stick to and run. Another kid that I really like a lot is Jonah Hayes on the offensive line, and he was a linebacker, and he was named first team all-conference linebacker last year. He's really going to be one of those guys that is going to have to be a leader for East Dubuque in order for them to see some success. While the conference gets realigned, East Dubuque hasn't had a whole lot of success against the teams in the North Division. And then you add in the fact that their crossover games are going to be with AFC Milledgeville and Ackwen. Those are 3 teams that they're familiar with in the past. Ackwen is a team on the rise. Milledgeville is a team that's probably going to drop off a little bit, but they're still going to be what I feel is going to be competitive. And then, of course, AFC. Unfortunately, AFC was 0-9 last year, and they're struggling with numbers. So, there's some opportunities for East Dubuque to better that win total, but they need some of these kids to step up and come up big, honestly. Another one I really like on the offensive line is Alex Anger. He's a good player, plays offensive line, defensive line. You get him going, and that could help make some holes. And really, East Dubuque has a good-sized line. It's just how much development have they put forward to make their line size better. I mean, You got to remember, East Dubuque played with Dakota last year. They only lost by a touchdown. Dakota went on to lose in the quarterfinals by 2 points to the state champs. So it's not that East Dubuque hasn't had talent. It's just that they don't put it all together consistently to win the games that they need to in order to get to the playoffs. Some other guys to look at, obviously Declan Schemmel. This could be one of those options that could play quarterback. He's also their kicker. He was an honorable mention all-conference kicker. Also was a receiver. He has 250 yards receiving as well. He could be an option for quarterback. Another one could be Zach Meyer. Don't have any stats on Zach, but I know that one time or another he had been a quarterback in his career. And then at running back, you're going to come in with Jesse Johnson and Zach Schulte. Neither one has really seen a whole lot. Between the two of them, they have 11 career rushing yards, but it's something that will give them the opportunity to move forward with. And I don't want to forget Brennan Smith, because Brennan Smith does return. He has 255 yards rushing and 300 yards receiving. And to really round out the rest, for offensive line and defensive line, you have Zach Lee, Dakota Trowbridge, and Alex Gockel. So East Dubuque has the ability to do something.
It's putting it together.
Yeah, and time will tell. I mean, unfortunately, playing with the big dogs of the Old Northwest, East Dubuque just could not compete with them on a regular basis. So we'll see what they have in store, and hopefully good things come for the Warriors in 2019. The Orangeville Broncos made back-to-back playoff appearances for the first time since 1995 and 96, getting to the playoffs with a 5-4 record before losing to Ottawa Marquette in the first round, 41-6. They finished with a 4-3 conference record in the NUIC Upstate Division as well. Now they are going to go for 3 consecutive playoff appearances for only the second time in school history, and the last time that had been accomplished was 1991 to 1993. Obviously, in talking with Coach Jay Doyle, the Broncos are very much excited about getting into the North Division, getting back in rivalries with the old NWIC conference, specifically Dakota and Lena Winslow. I know he's excited about taking on those two teams. Teams that they have not faced since 2008 and 2006, respectively. Of course, the last time they played Dakota in 2008, I think everybody knows what happened there. They lost in the regular season and then came back and got Dakota in the first round of the playoffs.
I may or may not have walked out of the field with everybody else.
So, Orangeville has the team that they've been talking about for the last 4 years. They're finally here as a varsity group. Will they be more than just a one-and-done type team this year in 2019? That is the real question that we need to ask on Orangeville. Obviously, coming into the North Division, they have played with Stockton. They have yet to beat Stockton. They have not played a Dakota or a Lena Winslow type team for quite a while. Can they compete with one or both of those schools? I believe they can. You take a look at East Dubuque. They've played East Dubuque each of the last 2 seasons, going 1-1 with the Warriors. They have not played Galena in a while, and they've never played Du-Pec. So these are some areas that are going to be new for the Broncos. As far as their crossover games, nothing new there. Aquin, AFC, and Milledgeville, teams that they're familiar with. And really, that first game with Aquin at home on Saturday, the 31st, that is going to be a game that, quite frankly, Orangeville needs to win to set the tone to start the season.
I wish you guys were closer and could have seen how he literally just I don't know, are you excited?
Yes, I am. That's a big game. Big game. Even it's so big that Deep Dish Football will be there for that game. Coach Big Pete's coming out to Orangeville that day to take a look and see what's going on in the NUIC. But Orangeville does bring a lot of talent back. Obviously, almost 5,700 career yards are returning. A lot of that is on the back of Garrett Rodaball. First team all-conference running back. He's got 2,502 yards rushing in his career with 21 touchdowns. He has a legitimate shot to reach that 4,000-yard plateau, which only 4 other running backs in conference history have done. You have Carter Kleckler coming back. He is not going to be at quarterback this year. He will be moving to running back, and he'll stay at defensive back, where he was a unanimous choice for first team all-conference. Dalton Lowe back at running back and linebacker. And then you bring in the new quarterback, the coach's son, Jake Doyle. He's got a lot on his plate as a first-year varsity starter. He's only going to be a junior, but the Broncos are going to rely on him heavily to understand and know the offense, manage the offense, and they're going to rely on him to make plays in this offense in order for the Broncos to be successful. Some other big names that will help out on the offensive side of the ball are going to be Chase Jordan and Carson Rote. Carson Rote didn't get a lot of carries last year, but he did score his first career varsity touchdown last year. Chase Jordan came on strong late in the year, where he ended up finishing with 667 yards rushing and 10 touchdowns. Some other guys to really take a look at are going to be Chad Diddens, again, on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. Chase Bowen is going to be at most likely a guard position and then play on the defensive line. You got Zach Baker, who's going to be at tight end and linebacker. I'm really excited to see what he can do at these positions. I've heard he's gotten a little bit bigger in the offseason compared to last year. Kate Janicki, who had been at a running back type position before, is most likely going to be moving to the offensive line this year, which spells for a lot of speed. I mean, you take a look at Bowen and Janicki, if they both are sitting at guard, that's a lot of speed coming out at guard to be able to pull, lead, do things like that. So that helps the Broncos out in that aspect. And then, of course, you have Ethan Pfeiffer and Will Sederstrom as well. So the Broncos have the ability to have a great nucleus put together here. They need to have some senior leadership because they do have some young guys in there that are playing, but a lot of these guys already have the varsity experience. It's just, what can they do against Alina Winslow and a Dakota? The rest of their schedule are all going to be teams that they're familiar with. So we'll see what the Broncos do in 2019. The Stockton Blackhawks entered the 2019 season coming off of a first-round defeat to the hands of the Dakota Indians, 48-8. They finished the season 7-3. They were 6-1 in the NUIC Upstate, finishing second in the conference to the preseason favorite Milledgeville Missiles, who end up carrying out exactly as was predicted. Obviously, Stockton has dominated the 2010s with 6 conference titles and a state runner-up, but all that came in the old Upstate division. Now with the new realignment pushing the Blackhawks into the North Division, they get to rekindle some old rivalries with Lena Winslow, Dakota, and Galena. However, with that said, it's also going to make their schedule a little bit tougher. And then you add in the rise of an Orangeville and an Aquin, both teams that they will face, you're going to see a tough road ahead for the Blackhawks to get back to the playoffs in 2019, considering the fact that how much they've lost. I mean, Stockton doesn't have a whole lot of size. They have good athletes, but can they match up against the bigger teams that they're going to be facing? Obviously, one of the things that will help them is their crossover schedule with Milledgeville, Aquin, and AFC. But how much does Stockton really have in the tank this year? Coming back at quarterback will be Garrett Buskey. He had 445 passing yards last year with 9 touchdowns. Also, a target of his could potentially be Drew McGovern. I don't think so. I think Drew's going to be on the offensive line. He just has so much size that for Stockton to be successful, I think he's going to need to be there.
Yeah.
In fact, he was voted as first team all-conference offensive line and defensive line last year, so I don't really see him playing tight end all that much. Some guys that can help carry the load as far as the backfield is concerned, because you're going to have to replace Colin Dvorak, who was an all-state running back for the Blackhawks. You're going to have to replace Chase Rowe, who had played for the varsity for at least 2 years, I think even a third year. Either way, you lose a lot of experience in that backfield. Guys that can step up are going to have to be Jason Herman, Hunter Hilly, and Tyler Barch. All 3 of these guys were able to get carries last year. All 3 of them found the end zone at least 2 times each. But they didn't have a whole lot of yards altogether, as the main focus point for the Blackhawks was Dvorak. This year, obviously, it's going to be different. Another one that can help out is going to be Winston McPeak. He could be a 4th running back in that mix. He's also going to be on the defensive side of the ball in the defensive backfield. On the lines, you have Zach Cook returning. He was an off-conference honorable mention center last year. And then you have Bryant Kiefer as well, who was an honorable mention all-conference lineman. So they do have that for them. But this is a little bit different than what they're used to.
Yeah. I don't remember if you touched on it or not, but I mean, they're only returning just a little over 1,000 yards of offense. And I'm not sure what years past, but that just seems so small for Stockton.
No, you're right. I mean, you take a look at what Stockton had as far as yardage coming back in previous seasons. I mean, you're talking anywhere from 2,500 up to as high as 4,000 yards in any given season. So to only have 1,000 career total yards coming back is not a lot for a Stockton Blackhawks team, considering the success that they've had in the 2010s. So we'll see what happens there. But some other guys that can help out on the offensive line or defensive line is going to be Ethan Cook and Jordan Paisley. And then, of course, you still have a guy I forgot to mention, and I don't want to forget to mention, and that's Cody Schultz, who was second team all-conference on both the offensive and defensive lines. So you put that all together, and they have 3 linemen that were all-conference last year, at least receiving votes for all-conference. None of them were first team, but they have some good kids that can make things happen. Of course, they finished 6-1 in the upstate, so you're going to have some kids that do that. But the fact that they were underclassmen and receiving that recognition is going to be a big thing. But let's see what the Blackhawks do. They have a big game at home to kick off the season with the Milledgeville Missiles. Last year, Milledgeville stunned the Hawks in Week 3. I believe it was 34-8. It was a beatdown. One that really showed the difference, because after that game you thought Stockton would have some struggles against some teams like in Orangeville or in Aquin, and they did not. So what was Milledgeville really 34-8 better than Stockton? I don't know, but that was the final score, But this year, Stockton's going to have a tough go, and they're going to have to get it started off right out of the gates with Milledgeville, Aquin, and AFC for weeks 1, 2, and 3. The Dakota Indians enter the 2019 season looking for their 20th trip to the playoffs over the past 22 seasons. They are also coming off their first quarterfinal appearance since the 2011 state title run. Dakota was 8-4 last year. They were 5-3 in the NUIC Northwest before losing to Forreston 22-20 in the quarterfinals, which was quite interesting considering the fact that their Week 3 loss to Forreston was 40-20. So being able to offset that and get back to that close of a score was a huge effort in its own right. Obviously, Dakota started off the 2000s having won 9 conference titles in 11 seasons, but since then they have been in the mix towards the top of the conference, but they really have never been in the title hunt. I think the last time you could officially have put Dakota in the title hunt was the 2015 season when they were ranked as high as number 2 in the state that year before losing to Lena Winslow and then eventually to Galena in Week 9. Obviously, they're going to have some new faces mixed in with some old faces, but I feel Dakota has enough talent to make another playoff run depending on how everything shakes out. You take a look at the games that Dakota will have to play, and their crossover games are going to be familiar opponents, Forreston, West Carroll, and EPC. Of course, 2 of the 3 are teams that Dakota has lost to, West Carroll being a team that Dakota has had a lot of success against. Some big names coming back, first and foremost, is Josh Clark at quarterback. He was actually the most efficient passer in the NUIC last year with 62% completion rating, threw for 948 yards and 12 touchdowns, picked up another 368 yards on the ground with another 8 touchdowns, and he was an honorable mention all-conference linebacker at that. At tight end and defensive back is going to be Wyatt Rocky. Wyatt Rocky was a first-team all-conference selection at defensive back. And then you have the kicker and punter Nolan Lentz, who was also first-team all-conference as a punter and honorable mention all-conference as a kicker. On the offensive line, Luke Schwartz was second-team all-conference. He returns this year. And then you have a slew of other players that have had significant time, but just not a lot of the stats to back it up. And one of those is Evan Riggle. I really like this kid. Kid is tough. He's hard. Plays the game the right way. He was a running back and defensive back for the Indians. I think this is the season you're going to see him shift to a linebacker role. That's just how much weight and muscle he has packed on in the offseason. He did have 217 yards rushing with 4 touchdowns and 86 yards receiving and a touchdown. So we'll see what Evan brings to the table. As far as some other notables, on the defensive side of the ball, you got the linebacker tandem of Riley Jones and Richie Thompson back. Riley Jones was an honorable mention all-conference linebacker last year for the Indians. And then you have Quentin Heilmeyer as well, which Q got in there quite a bit there, started some games at linebacker for the Indians as well. And I think Dakota's got the talent level to get there. They don't have a whole lot of size, but they have speed. And again, it's one of those teams they got to put it all together. Another kid to look out for is going to be Ben Holste. Last year he saw not a lot of playing time due to injury. He should be back full speed this year, which should help out the Indians. Offensive and defensive lines, you have Cody Mead and Dalton Riggle. Riggle's having a huge year in the offseason so far. And at tight end linebacker is Jacob Kleckner as well. Another kid that could really turn the heads of some people is going to be Cade Wales. I could see him getting some significant playing time at linebacker. Interestingly enough, though, the Indians do have a little bit of a quarterback battle going on with Clark and Cade Moyer. Of course, if this were to matriculate and Moyer winning out, a great position to see Josh Clark fall back into would be the tight end position where he had once come from. But Clark knows the system that Coach Joe Free wants to run. And I know Coach Free is going to wait until the week prior of the season beginning to actually name his starters. He wants to give everybody a fair chance at earning their spots to get the right people on the field. So we'll see what Dakota comes up with. Being in the North Division, obviously they have a good chance of competing for the eventual conference title. Lena Winslow will be a tall order for the Indians to shake. They have not fared out very well with Lena Winslow since the 2015 season. So there you have it on Dakota. The final team in the new North Division are the Lena Winslow Panthers. Lena Winslow is coming off an 11-2 season where they finished 7-1 in the NUIC Northwest before losing in the semifinals to conference rival Forreston 34-28. Obviously, the Panthers just missed out on their opportunity for a four-state title. They missed out on an opportunity for back-to-back state championships. They will return as the heavy favorite in the NUIC in 2019. They will also return as the heavy favorite for the Class 1A state title in 2019. They do feature two Division I recruits in both Isaiah Bruce and Jennings Dunker. Both guys are committed to going to Iowa. Isaiah Bruce will be entering his senior season. Jennings Dunker is coming in as a junior this year. They also have a running back chasing history, and there goes my pen, and that is Sean Ormiston. Ormiston was a unanimous selection on both sides of the ball at running back and linebacker last year. Comes in with 2,795 career rushing yards, 39 career touchdowns. He is chasing former teammate Ravion Valentine's record. He only needs about 1,900 yards to set that record in his senior year. Albeit, as long as he hits 1,205 yards, he will crack the 4,000 yard mark as well to become one of 5 running backs with 4,000 career yards. Of course, barring injury and anything of that sort. Isaiah Bruce contributed with 1,173 yards rushing, 20 touchdowns. In his career, he's got 564 yards receiving with another 13 touchdowns. He too was first team, both sides of the ball, running back and defensive end, and he was the NUIC Northwest MVP as the Dick DeHaven Award winner last season. On the other side of things, you have a good core surrounding these two guys coming in. As we mentioned already, Jennings Dunker on both the offensive and defensive sides of the ball, O-line, D-line. You have Ethan Gift returning as an honorable mention all-conference offensive lineman. He'll also be on both sides of the ball. And a couple guys that got a lot of playing time, Jack Setterstrom and Hudson Humphrey. Hudson more so on the defensive side of the ball, Jack a little bit on the offensive side of the ball. Both those guys return, and then you have Cade Crispin coming back at tight end and defensive back. Some other guys to watch out for are obviously going to be Jacob Seipel on the offensive line and defensive line. Jensen Block got a little bit of time at running back as well. He returns. And then you have Joe Lenz, Brady Stitch, and Andrew Lehmeyer on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball as well. Lenz at linebacker, the other two at defensive line. It'll be interesting to see how those guys come about. Quite a few of those guys got playing time, but it was in, backup minutes. Can they make that into full-time varsity starting minutes? And that's what we're going to see. One of the critical areas for Lena Winslow is at quarterback. which seems to be the case every year when you talk about Lena Winslow football.
Yes.
So normally Lena Winslow will put somebody, a senior at quarterback, somebody who's good with their hands, able to handle the football. This year, it looks like they're going to give the nod to sophomore Luke Benson, who is the younger brother of last year's quarterback, Cade Benson. You hear a lot of good things about Luke, big arm, understands the offense, which helps out since his dad, Coach Benson, is the offensive coordinator. So, it gives you a little bit of familiarity. But if you take a look at what Lena Winslow has in store, the motto in the Rick Aaron era has always been, we don't rebuild.
We reload.
So, Lena Winslow simply looks to be reloading for the 2019 season. One of the things that they cannot have happen is the oversight of their opponents, which I feel that they struggled with last season, specifically EPC and Forreston. The one team that they came to play against, Aurora Christian, man, that was exciting. But obviously, Forreston brought it to them the next week and, went on to win the title. But you take a look at Lena Winslow and Forreston over the last 3 years, and it's really been very interesting to see. You take a look at where both those two will be starting the 2019 season, and those two should be ranked in the top 3 of the state. Both of them are going to be their conference title representatives, at least as far as a prediction standpoint. And the best part, they meet up in week 7. And that game is going to be played in Forreston. So it'll be interesting to see the two teams that are going to be the talk of the conference this year actually get a square up against each other in the regular season again. And you just look over the last 3 years, and it's just amazing what they've done. All right, so that gives you a look into the NUIC North Division, not to be confused with the Northwest Division. But it'll be an interesting year. I think we're going to have a very competitive run here. Obviously, you have a mix of teams. You have 2 former upstate teams. The rest of them are all former Northwest Division teams. Obviously, when we get to the South Division, you see the same thing. 2 upstate teams. The other 5 were Northwest teams. So it'll be interesting to see the new shakeout on how the season goes. I'm really interested and intrigued to see what some of these matchups are going to bring, such as an Orangeville, Dakota, and Orangeville, Lena Winslow, a Stockton, Dakota, which we got to see a little bit last year of. And then you start throwing Galena in the mix. And then, the talk of Du-Pec and Galena starting to come back up, along with Orangeville getting better than the 5-5. And then, of course, Stockton, Stockton having so much dominance over the years, will that continue or is that going to drop off? So there's really a lot of question marks here in 2019. So that concludes our North Division preview. We'll bring our South Division preview next week. Also, we'll be kicking off our 14 days to kickoff with an article and a preview of each team every single day of the week until we have kickoff on Friday, August 30th. Keep in mind that Orangeville will be kicking off on Saturday, August 31st at 1 p.m. in Orangeville against the Aquin Bulldogs. Until then, always root for the NUIC.